Here I am spawned in on day one. I punched a tree, although the game was running at like 2 frames a second. I tried to mine at like 2 frames a second, but it was so bad. I had to go into the settings and change them so that the game would just run a little bit better. After the extremely laggy experience, killed some sheep for food and wool for beds. Checked out this village that I saw from the distance. Spotted another village off in the distance. Then I found a good spot to set up a little camp for a base. After a brief argument, I had to evict this guy from the cave. Was too kind of mad about it. Then proceeded to steal the guy's loot and take all of his iron. After emerging from the cave with 19 pieces of iron, I quickly made a bed and then I went to sleep. On day two, I spent a lot of time chopping down a bunch of trees. And then I returned back to my area, invested in some iron tools, and I began working on an area where my base would be. At the end of the day, this is what I had for a frame. It's not much, but it gets better tomorrow. Just kidding. I actually spent the night building the house, so it got done before the next day. And with the addition of a door, I finished the base. I dug out the floor of the place, added 2 blocks for a floor, began digging out an area for a basement, and then I used the blocks I got from my basement digging to finish up the floor of my house. I tried adding some modifications to my house, but I just didn't like it, so I replaced it back. I added a little fancy bed area where I would sleep, kind of like a cot. There were a lot of junk items in my inventory, so I emptied those. And then I proceeded to dig out the rest of the basement. The footage corrupted, so just imagine me digging along. I then proceeded to dig out an area for storage. After digging out the storage room, I added the chests. And then after finishing that, I went to sleep. Day 4, I started by punching grass so I could get some seeds. And then I found a good area to start making a wheat farm. And I planted the seeds to the farm. I proceeded to grab the hay bales from this village, killed the local golem. Then I proceeded to plant some bamboo I had in my inventory. I emptied some leftover items into some chests. And then I planted a little area for a sugarcane farm. This place would end up coming clutch in the future. I entered this cave again with fresh gear that I had made and grabbed some coal. And then I lit up the area. I can't have any more mobs such as this creeper spawning, so gotta make sure they stay out. And back into this cave I went, this time for some better stuff. I got gold, iron, and diamonds. Also redstone, but I was mainly here for the diamonds, and there were loads of them. I also found an amethyst shield, which was pretty cool. I found a name tag in a dungeon chest, which I thought was pretty neat. Day 5, I exited the cave with a ton of loot in my inventory. I then used most of my diamonds to make a diamond pickaxe and some armor, and then I went to sleep. The next day, I made some hoppers. I then dug out an area for a thing that I like to call a cow crusher, added the hopper system, and began to lure these animals over to my base. I put the cows into the holding chambers, and then I went to sleep. The next day, I was in this cave bullying this Enderman, and I actually got a pearl. I went back into this cave to try to find some lava, only finding diamonds instead. I headed back to the surface, went over to spawn, and spotted the lava pool that I was trying to find. I mined the obsidian, headed back to my base, and then I went to sleep. Day 8, I dug out an area in my basement for where I would put a nether portal, and then I laid down the obsidian for the portal, and then I lit it. I checked out the area around where my nether portal had spawned in another, but I went back through since I couldn't see anything useful. I started a strip mine so that I could get down to diamond level, but I'm pretty sure I never ended up using this at all. I then headed in this direction of the plains so I could try to find a plains village and take their carrots. Once I located the village that I wanted, I took their carrots and I got the heck out of there. I got back to my base and then I went to sleep. Day 9, I planted those carrots that I got from the village and did some other chores as well. I then set up a little area where I could plant a pumpkin and melon farm. I then lured some sheep over to where they would have a new home. And then I went to sleep. Day 10, I started planning out an area for where I would put a villager breeder and after grabbing some supplies, I started making the outline to the villager breeder. I was trying to kidnap villagers from this village, but it got dark, so I had to sleep. The next day, I was ready to kidnap some villagers, and after a little bit, I had two villagers ready to start a whole new generation. Of course, I still needed the tunnel for the baby villagers would go and grow up, but that wasn't too hard after a little bit of digging and placing blocks. I did some chores, gave carrots to the villagers, and then I dyed my bed blue. I decided to make a spyglass just because I could. I began work on digging out an area for an enchanting room. I made the enchanting table and then I placed it down. I placed some bookshelves that I made around the enchanting table and then I went to sleep. Day 13, I went on a quest to try to find some spruce wood. I took this river to the ocean. During my search, I found a warm ocean ruin and I managed to find a sniffer egg, which I thought was pretty neat. I found this egg in another ocean ruin by a ocean monument, so that's why I had my mining fatigue. Shortly afterward, I managed to find another sniffer egg in another ocean ruin, making my quest of getting two sniffers complete. As for spruce trees, I managed to find the smallest patch of trees of spruce that I've ever seen. Shortly afterwards, I start heading back to base, and I made it back safely. Planted down some spruce saplings, then I dug down for a mine down at diamond level. I plan on using this later on to for explosive machine, so that's why I made it. I then bone mealed a moss block I got from shipwreck so that I could have enough to plant the two sniffer eggs. Day 17, I was at this acacia village trying to find a saddle, and in this leather house, I managed to find one. So now I could ride this camel. Yay! I rode over to the Plains village just so that I could steal the stonecutter there, and then I rode back. When I got back to my base, I immediately went to sleep. I used the stonecutter I got from the village to make some deep slate walls. Then I found a good area to start placing down the wall for the sniffer area, and then I planted the sniffer eggs. While I let the sniffer eggs hatch, I worked on the rest of the area for the sniffer so that it would be looking good. I also did some other chores to help pass the time so that the sniffer eggs could hatch. I checked on the sniffer eggs and I saw that they were pretty close to hatching, but not quite there yet. I missed the first sniffer hatch, but I was able to see the second sniffer hatch. My camel had wandered up the hill, so I had to ride him down the hill safely and put him with the sniffers before I went to sleep. Day 19, I remember the camels can ride over walls, so I had to make a lead real quickly and tie him to a fence post. He's safe, don't worry. I mined this gravel so I could get some flint and make a fletching table from it. I began to work on a villager trading hall so I could get all the emeralds and books for enchants that I would never need. I started laying a track so I could get a villager over to the trading hall. This was one of the reasons why I made that villager breeder so early on so that all the villagers could have grown up by now and I can hire them for emeralds. Anyways, I made this guy Fletcher so now I could trade sticks for him and have an easy source of emeralds. I locked in the deal so that he would never lose it, and then I went to sleep. I was back in his village stealing the hay bales. Then I fed my cows so I could try to get to level 30. In the background, I've been adding bookshelves to this enchanting setup so I could get a pretty good enchant on my pickaxe. I headed down into this long tunnel just to get a few resources real quickly. After that, I brought a villager over to the trading hall and I kept placing a lectern down over and over again until I had a librarian with looting 3. I put the Looting 3 book onto a diamond sword, and then I was ready to go into the nether and start collecting ender pearls. I had gotten all the ender pearls I needed to find the stronghold, so I just needed to go find a fortress and kill some blazes. I traveled for a little bit, and then once I reached the fortress, I located the blaze spawner and I started killing as many blazes as I could. After getting 29 blaze rods, I got the heck out of there and started getting back to my portal. While I was trying to kill some endermen, I accidentally hit a pigman while I was trying to retrieve my boat, so all the pigmen got mad at me. Luckily, I was able to handle them like a pro and not die. I then stupidly tussled with these piglin and I still didn't manage to die somehow. Long story short, I managed to make it back to the portal safely and sound without any harm to me whatsoever. After that big adventure, I had to sleep up for the next day so that I wouldn't be so tired. Day 23, I started off by doing some chores. Then I dug out a little bit of an area for a netherwort farm. I then used the ninjabrain bot calculator to help me find the general location to a stronghold. I've used this calculator in speedruns before, so I kind of knew what I was doing. I then did a little bit of modifying to the villager training hall so that it would be just a little bit safer and better to use. Then I try to get a more accurate reading of the eyes, and I managed to get a good coordinate spot to try to throw again. Then I went to sleep. The next day, I did some stuff around my base. I went to check on my sniffers, and then a creeper blew up behind me, so I had to fill in the hole that the creeper made. And then I went to check on my villagers, and it seemed like a baby zombie had gotten to the Fletcher. I slept to get rid of the rain, and then the next day, day 25, I got a new Fletcher for the trading hall. I started leading the more villagers to the trading hall so I could get an unbreaking book and a mending book. After that, I went to sleep. I got another villager inside the trading hall and decided to make this guy a Fletcher so that I had 2 Fletchers to trade sticks with. I did some other stuff around the base. I headed down into the caves to look for a lot of resources that I was lacking on, such. A short while later, I exited a cave with a bunch of materials that I've gotten. I emptied my inventory, said hi to my villagers, and then I went to sleep. On day 28, I started off the day by giving bread to my villagers, and then I headed down to this cave to get some materials. And after I got out, I decided to make a cobblestone generator. Here's some footage of me building the generator. After I built it, I AFK'd at the cobblestone generator for some time to get enough materials for a future build I want to do. I checked how much cobblestone I had and I saw that I had more than enough for the build, so I went to sleep. I spent part of day 32 just running around. Then I headed into this cave to look for some ores, such as diamonds and redstone and one. I found a lush cave, and in that lush cave, I found two axolotls, so now I had two pets. I made another portal to get out, destroyed the portal, and then I headed back to my original portal where I got back to my base. I got to see a sniffer dig up some seeds. Oh, and I also added the axolotls to a little pond I made, sniffers, so now they're in there with the sniffers. I dug out in one area of my wall, which would ultimately end up being a smelter area. So now I could cook ores really fast and food really fast, not just through the furnaces upstairs. After that, I placed a bunch of scaffolding for where I would put a mob farm in the future. After all that work, I went to sleep. Day 34, I started it off by checking my sniffers. Then I grabbed some cobblestone, headed up the scaffolding tower, and then I started making a platform for where the mob farm would be, obviously. I then started preparing for things I would need for the mob farm. I smelted some gold, then I continued the preparations for the farm. After all that, I went to sleep. Day 35, I was back up at the platform setting up the collection system for the mob farm. However, I started getting ready for a different idea. The search for the stronghold. After a bit, I found the spot I needed to dig down and I started digging down. I landed in the stronghold and began looking for the portal room. Upon locating it, I placed in most of the eyes, although I didn't have enough, so I had to go make a portal and go back to my base to get the gear I had forgotten. I then returned to the stronghold to check out the library, and I was about to enter the end, but I realized I still hadn't gotten the eyes that I needed, so I killed some Enderman, got my blaze powder, and then I made the eyes of Ender that I needed to enter the end. I made the little thing for where I would place the beds and wait for the dragon to perch. When it finally perched, I almost scuffed the one cycle, but I managed to clutch with my diamond sword and managed to kill the dragon. I grabbed the egg real quickly, then I went up to the end gateway and went through to the outer islands. I searched for a while before I found an end city within a ship. I approached the end city and basically did five things. One, kill shulkers. Two, loot chests. Three, get to end ship. Four, get the elytra. And five, get the heck out of there. Found another end gateway that got me back to the main island, and then I went through the portal to get back to my base. I put some stuff into the chests, and then I continued getting ready to for building the mob farm. I basically had everything I needed to start making the mob farm, so that's what I did. So while I build this, if you're watching this video, please make sure to like and subscribe. It's free and it'll help out a ton. Once I had finished making the mob farm, I lit up the top and then I flew down to test it out. And it worked okay. Obviously, I wasn't going to get like tons of stuff and experience from it, but it was a starter thing that I had made and it was okay for now. But later on, I'd be making a farm that was super OP that got me tons of resources that I would need for whatever I do in the future. I AFK'd until I was at level 46, and then I flew down to the ground where my base was, and then I went into my base to do some enchanting. I, I don't want to show me getting bad enchants, so after that I just did some stick trading with the villagers. Day 44, I was back up at my mob farm trying to get some more levels. I went back down to make a armor stand, and then I headed back up to see how else Sleeping Edge would do with an armor stand and the mobs next to it. However, I failed to account that not Sweeping Edge, knockback actually pushes the armor stand around, which would affects the way my super OP farm that I mentioned would run, and it kind of costed me a life. So you have to wait to see how that happens. I made another sweeping edge sword, which I then used to combine with my other sword with the better enchantments in the sweeping edge 2 so that I could have sweeping edge 3 on it. I spent some more time at my mob farm getting more levels to, I think, get back to level 30. I made it to level 39, in which soon after I flew down and did some stick trades with my villagers. After the stick trading, I was in the enchanting area trying to get some good enchants on my armor, but I had to disenchant a lot, so there's that. I saw a warning trader, but after I saw his trades, I had to deal with him. After the merciless murder, I got some bending enchantments on my armor so that they could heal while I was at the mob farm. That was pretty cool. Tried to get it on my sword, but that was too low on level, so I had to go back to the mob farm and get more levels there, and then I was able to get the enchant on my sword. After all of that stuff that I did, I went to sleep and went on to day 48. On this day, I had to get the sheep back into their enclosure. I think what happened is that there was a thunderstorm, and lightning had struck onto the fence, so that left me some time to get that fixed. I did some tree chopping after that. However, I went over to spawn to start digging out this area that you see me doing now for an iron farm. I then started to dig out an area for where the zombie and villagers would go. And then I dug one out for the other side as well. I soon realized afterward that the thing was too small, so that I had to rebuild it. And even then, it's still too small, so I have to redo it at some point. But I didn't realize that until now, editing it, so I'll probably work on it in the next video. I fixed the water system to the farm. Soon after, I began mob proofing the place so that no mobs or iron golems would spawn in the wrong places. I added the killing area for the iron golems so that they would die and drop the iron. After that, I started to get ready to abduct some villagers. I decided to take a break from all the iron farm stuff to start a raid. It started off pretty well, but soon the raid members had killed all the villagers, so that was kind of a loss. Luckily for me, I was able to go back and get another guy with a banner, another raid. So I did at the desert village, and This time I took my time to make sure the villagers are safe, and after some hard efforts and a totem pop, I defeated the raid. I decided to do a little bit of trading with my villagers. I then began to transport a villager over to the iron farm. It was a little bit harder since there were mobs trying to attack me. So once I got to the iron farm, I decided to go back and get the rest of the villagers that I needed for that side of the iron farm. They made it to the farm a lot more safely than the other villager did, and I got one more bed for the third villager. So now it was almost done. I just needed to get a zombie down there. To help wait until night, I made the track to the iron farm a bit better, and then I also transported the other villagers to the farm as well. Then once night had approached, I was able to get some zombies down into the villager area, so then iron golems would start spawning. I did have some trouble getting things situated, but after some time and effort, I managed to get the farm working to how it I was trying to get it to be. So I didn't record up until day 60, but basically I finished the iron farm and decided to gather supplies for a raid farm. Now, why did I decide to build a raid farm? Well, I my current XP farm sucks, and I could get loads of experience and items from a raid farm, emeralds, redstone, and totems. And if I want to put a rule on myself for the videos about farms that if I have killed it or if I have it, I can make a farm out of it. Luckily for me, I already defeated a raid, so I'm able to build one. Raid farm, that is. Anyways, let's get back to day 61. This shulker box has what I need for the raid farm, although there's more supplies needed to gather. By the end of the day, this is what I had gotten for the raid farm before I went to sleep. During my collection process on day 2, I realized I only had slime balls, so I had to go find a swamp, try to see if there were slimes there so I could kill them. Slime ball. I eventually found a swamp, and I there was a village nearby. That was cool. Kind of used that as like a little base while I was killing the slime. After collecting all the slime balls that I needed, I went through the nether back to my home port, where I was able to craft sticky pistons and add them to my supply that I needed for the raid farm. I had a bit of a casualty, but it wasn't that bad. I was able to get my stuff, luckily. I went to sleep before I could do some more harm to myself. Filled one sugar box full of stuff, and I proceeded to start filling another sugar box full of stuff I needed for the raid farm. By the end of the day, I got most of the things I would need for the raid farm. There was still a little bit of stuff I needed, but I was able to get those later, so it's not that big of a deal. I went to sleep, and then the next day, day 66, I went to look for my build location. I decided to go with this ocean I found near the Plains village that was there when I took their stuff. I sat down my lily pad and then I started building the raid farm. You see this? This would give me trouble in the future for no reason at all whatsoever. Yet it did. I took a break from the raid farm to try to get a villager that would sell me Protection 4 and also Sweeping Edge 3. Then it was back to finishing the raid farm. You see this bit right here? The pistons are at the right height, so they won't work the bubble column correctly. I didn't realize this until I went to fix it later. That's when I was able to fix it. I'll describe that later. Anyways, I finished the farm, went to an outpost to kill a pillager with a banner, tried to test out the farm, realized it didn't work, I had to fix it, realized that the pistons I mentioned earlier were fixed wrong, tried it tried it out again, realized that the items weren't sorting in, spent one day trying to sort it out, but then I had another idea I wanted to do. I first decided to loot this bastion and I checked out the chest and it had some pretty good stuff I wanted for the future. After that, I traveled through the Nether for a little bit before I got to a fortress in a soul sand valley to hunt for some wither skulls from the skeletons. After I had one skull, then two skulls, and finally three skulls, and then I was out of there. I stopped by to loot this bastion real quickly, but soon enough I had to get going, and after that I was home. I went to sleep, and on day 80, after jamming along to a music disc, work. I got to work getting ready to fight the wither. After that, I flew to a far location where I went into a that went very deep down and used that to make a tunnel to summon the wither. After that, the battle was on. After a little bit, I managed to defeat the wither. After that, I made a portal to fly through the nether back to my base. However, I went back to lay down a lodestone and get an achievement for it. A little later, I mined some riches I had collected, and then I went to sleep. The next day, I went back to the raid farm to use it for a bit, although while I was AFK, I got killed by some Vexes. I went back to retrieve my stuff and kept using it, although I realized that my gear was slightly underpowered and that's what's causing all the stuff to spawn. So I decided to max out my armor and get Netherite. But first, I had to get some books from my librarians to get a better sword. And then after preparing get by shearing sheep and getting wood, I went into the Nether and made a tunnel down to Y level 15, set up a little base where where I could go back and make more beds, and then made a long tunnel and set up stations where I could explode the beds to try to find some ancient debris. After a bit, I found my first piece of ancient debris. Actually, it was more than one piece of ancient debris. I found three pieces. And while digging, I found three more pieces of ancient debris all right next to each other. And after a little bit, I found all the ancient debris I needed to make full netherite armor and a netherite sword. I smelted all the ancient debris I had, and then I made some netherite ingots. I decided that I wanted to preserve this diamond armor and make some new, better netherite armor with better enchantments on them. I crafted the arm stands, placed them down, and then added the first pieces of armor that I ever made onto one of them. I made a smithing table, placed it down, and then added netherite to my sword. I made a fresh new pair of diamond armor and then added netherite to it, making it my first ever set of netherite armor in this world. I got villagers from the breeder and put them in the training hall to get the books that I wanted, such as Aqua Affinity, Depth Strider 3. Took a short break to expand the villager training hall. Then I got a Thorns book from a villager, which I was able to use to max out my netherite chest plates. After that, I spent a little time expanding my sugarcane farm. After spending some time at the raid farm, I got a Respiration 3 librarian. And after that, I was able to get max enchants on my helmet. My helmet on the armor stand with my chest plate already on it, and then I went to sleep. Next day, I proceeded to get nearly maxed out enchantments on my leggings without the swift sneak. And after getting a little bit more levels at the raid farm and getting Nether Falling 4 book from librarian, I was able to max out my netherite boots. And now I had fully decked out netherite armor. Then I went to sleep in my new armor. Since my house was the only thing that was looking unmodified, I decided that I would spend the last few days working on it. So after chopping down a bunch of trees and collecting a lot of stone, I got started on making my house better. After finishing the roof, I flew up to see what it looks like, but I didn't like it, so I flattened it down, and then it looks a lot better. Looking at my house, I realized I was still missing the beacon, so I flew over to the raid farm, grabbed as many emeralds as I could and turned them to blocks, rushed back home, made the emerald beacon, placed the beacon thing down, and as I went to sleep, that is how I spent my 100 days in Minecraft survival.